Chartmetric is proud to sponsor the upcoming season of And the Writer Is. As the go-to source for up-to-date global social, streaming, and audience data for artists and music industry professionals, Chartmetric strives to ensure everyone can have a successful career in music. Their easy-to-understand and powerful analytics on over 10 million artists and 100 million tracks will help answer all of your questions, from tracking your stats to discovering new talents. Throughout this season, we'll be showcasing Chartmetric data to reveal insights about our featured artists. Plans start as low as $10 a month. Learn more and get started today at chartmetric.com. Welcome to And the Writer Is. I am your host, Ross Golan. Today's top 10 Billboard producer, true story, became hooked on music after he found a guitar in the trash and then taught himself how to play it. And then eventually led himself to study at Berklee School of Music, where he honed his skills, which led to recording and touring with legendary artists such as Lauryn Hill and Alicia Keys, which led him to producing and writing for a variety of big records, which led him to Grammy nominations. This immigrant may be an impressive musician, but he's also a good husband and dad. And he is my friend, and the writer is Jeff Gitty Gittleman. Welcome to And the Writer Is, my friend.
Wow, I just got nervous. That was quite the introduction. Wow, I have a lot to live up to.
I see you at the farmer's market, so
Yes.
We are neighbors.
Yes, I love it. It's great.
I know that you fancy yourself not necessarily an Angelino, because you are probably think of yourself more as a New Yorker.
Not really at this point. I spend most of my life on the East Coast, but man, I do love the city. And, I'm not going to lie to you, Ross, when I first started coming out here, I used to hate it here, man. Like, as a New Yorker, I'd be like, get me the...
But don't New Yorkers hate everywhere except for New York? They hate New York, but they tell everyone they love it. They're like, oh, this ain't New York. Then they go to New York and they complain about.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Yes, because I don't like New York, and I lived there for years, and I'm from the East Coast, and I hate it. No, I hate it. But it was just so different. LA is so different and such a different pace. I used to not like it here, but I love it here, man. I love the creative community above all. I love that it's tangible here. The business is set up. A kid could grow up and I want to be an actress, and it's tangible. They could run into an actress at the farmer's market, how we do, and it's real, versus if you grow up somewhere in Columbus, Ohio or something like that. It's like, I want to be, an actress. Oh, keep dreaming. So I love this place here, man. It's like, and the business is here, the creative community is here, the farmers markets are here.
When we first started working together, you looked like a normal person, and now you look like you are a weightlifter, or you're like a model or something.
That's another.
Why are you getting all svelte? What are you trying to do to us, man?
Well, it's funny because the session that we had, that was my week one, and it was actually my day two, and it was Castle at the session who was informing me, which is another great thing. I love writing with people who have the same, that love being a dad, who love being, healthy. It's like we inspire each other. But yeah, man, just want to live a long time, as long as I can, write as many songs, be there for my daughter. I was a little older when I had her, so I'm going to be a little older when she's growing up, and so I need to be around, man, for a few more decades at least.
Do you miss cake?
No, because I make my own ice cream now. I make my own milk. My own almond milk, which then I make my own ice cream out of coconut cream and dates instead of sugar. And so I eat a pint of chocolate ice cream a day, and it's incredible. The one good thing about Instagram, the algorithm really got me. When I started getting to the healthy thing, instead of guitars and half naked women, now it's all healthy. The algorithm is just giving me all healthy recipes.
Healthy food and half-naked dudes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's tell a little bit of your musical journey. Well, let's start with when you were born. You weren't even born an American citizen.
Yes.
Two parents that are also not American citizens. Where were you born?
I was born in Moldavia. It's right near Ukraine. The capital of Moldavia is Chisinau. It's right near Romania and Bulgaria. Yeah, I grew up. Bro, I don't even know what the 80s are. I only know what the 80s are when I came here to learn, the culture, because I lived through the 80s, but I missed the whole thing in America. I didn't know it. I didn't listen to any American music. The only thing I ever heard before I got to America was I loved the Beatles. I fell in love with the Beatles, and so I heard a little bit of Led Zeppelin. But other than that, I've never heard any other music that's not
Was
Russian.
English spoken in your household
Not at all. Not at all.
So when you think of your past, your first 8 years, do you think of it in English?
That's interesting. It's really hard for me to remember a lot. My first 9 years, but yeah, it was a really crazy place, man. It was like communism, really a lot of racism, and I know we're gonna get into it, man. I know we're gonna get into it, but I would love to start here by saying that I've had a very different Jewish experience than a lot of my American friends, my Jewish American friends, and growing up Jewish in Moldavia in the '80s. Is very different.
How so?
Well, we were the minority, you know what I mean? And I'll never forget when I came to Hollywood, people are like, oh, you're Jewish, you're going to do fine. And it's so crazy to think that I was afraid to tell people I was Jewish my first 9 years of my life. Like, I've never been to a synagogue. I was bullied for being Jewish. We were a minority, and we had to really stick together. And yeah, I don't know how else to explain it besides... Yeah, we were really. It was dangerous for us. We had to, you know what I mean. It was just.
Why did your parents?
That's why we were refugees and we left because of being Jewish, in a place like that.
Were your grandparents from there?
Yeah, we were all there. We all just went together. We all got on the plane, all went together.
No, but I mean, where? Are they survivors of the Holocaust?
Absolutely. My grandma's still alive. She just turned 97. And last year, I really, I went with a camera crew, much like this, a friend, and we went to her apartment in New Haven, Connecticut, and I interviewed her, and I got her whole Holocaust story. I mean, her Holocaust story is, I could curse.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's fucking crazy, and it just reminded me of my purpose. And,
what was her
she
story
did all
like?
this. What's that?
What was her story like?
Oh, she was maybe I got to go back, maybe 13, 14 years old, and her she carried her brother with her mother through 20, 30 miles, so with no food, no bread, and she read basically her little brother who was 5 years old. She carried him, and through the field they had to run away, and my grandmother, his mom and daughter got killed. He was at war. He came back. They said, "Oh, this is what happened. They both, your sister and your mother died, and your mother died protecting your sister and stuff like that." And yeah, it's really crazy.
Yeah, I mean, my family shares a similar story, except for they got out, the late 30s, early 40s, depending on if they got out, they survived. If they didn't.
And they came here.
No, they moved to Nicaragua. The U.S. wouldn't let them Jews.
Wow.
I think there's this idea of well, why? I think people would ask, why wouldn't Jews just leave? And you're well, part of it was because you couldn't get visas to get out.
Yeah.
So if you were
there,
if you were originally getting a visa to get out, they purposely made it difficult to get visas.
Brother, we left in 1991. It took us 2 years to wait for that fucking visa, bro.
Yeah.
It took us 2 years. My aunt had to go and get it started 2 years prior, and we waited around, and I was the 7-year-old, and my parents were like, okay, don't tell anybody. But in 2 years, we're going to be leaving, going to America.
Yeah.
And so, are we leaving yet? No. Are we leaving yet? Is it time to go? No. Are we there yet? Are we going to America?
Yeah.
No, not yet. And then finally it's wow. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. Still don't tell anybody. Pack up in the middle of the night. Go on a train, to a boat, to a plane, and you land. You're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
That's all I remember. Yeah, in 91, landing in.
How's your Russian now?
It's so and so. It's pretty good. No, it's pretty good. I can still talk shit.
Do your parents speak English?
Yeah, no, my parents speak very good English.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
No brothers and sisters.
So you really are the American dream.
I really think so, man. And my mother's an American dream, dude. It's so crazy. I just keep coming back to it, like what makes me the way I am and to what makes me who I'm not and what makes me who I am. And I just keep coming back to this story of like coming back and, my mother, she was in Russia, there was no like upper class or lower class. Everybody was on the same thing unless you're, affiliated with some kind of organism.
Yeah, or if you're a politician. Yeah.
So yeah. And then
is that something that people, I mean, there are a couple of musicians that we can talk about off camera that have issues where they can't really talk about their parents because their parents are immigrants still in a country where
anybody from Russia who's not dirt poor, you could fill in the blanks. You could just assume where it's, you know what I mean, where it's coming from. Because it's not that we were homeless dirt poor, but very bare minimum.
Yeah.
Very bare minimum. If somebody does not live in a 1-bedroom apartment, or if they have a car, anything they're not taking the bus or living out, something else is going on. And so when we came, my mother, she was a designer. She was like a fashion designer, really specialized in shoes. And when we came, we couldn't find any work. My dad went to work as an engineer immediately, but my mom couldn't find work, so she started, she was a nanny. Then she was like a custodian at a play at some kind of a store. I just remember picking her up with my dad, and I was 9, and she was vacuuming floors, And then 2 years later, she just kept drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing, and then like we were in Connecticut, and Manhattan was an hour and a half away, and she would go for all these job interviews. And in my mind, I'm like, Mom, like I don't know, it's a different culture here, it's a different fashion, like it's an NBA like basketball. The shoes here are all influenced by basketball. It was the height of the Jordan, era. I was like, Mom, really? Like, so she kept drawing and drawing, and then going on these interviews, and she got the job working with Fila, and then within 3 years or maybe 5, but worked her way up to be the vice president of Fila. She designed the Grant Hills. So you probably know because you're okay. So my mom designed the Grant Hills shoes, and so I've seen her go from being a nanny, and not there's anything wrong with taking care of kids because I love my nanny. I wouldn't let her go for anything, but she went from vacuuming floors and being a custodian to being a vice president as I think it was the 3rd biggest shoe company at the time. So I've seen her work her ass off, and she would take the train, the Metro North, every day to an hour and a half, hour and 45 that way, hour 45 there. So she wasn't even around that much when I was in middle school and high school because she was just always in New York going back and forth. And I've seen her work her way up. And so,
Did you resent that at the time?
No, well, it got tough because everybody's parents took them to basketball practice. And I had to like bum rides to basketball practice and football. So it got to the point where
you had free shoes though.
Yo, when I tell you I hooked, that's how I got all my friends. I hooked. See, the problem was when we first moved, I moved to Hamden, Connecticut. It's inner city. This is why people are like, I don't understand, you're from Russia. Why do you talk the way you are? Why do you talk in such vernacular? And I'm like, this is how I learned how to speak English, guys. I learned how to speak English in an inner city listening to rap music. This is what I used to write out Snoop Dogg lyrics, and that's how I learned English, by studying the shit, And so there in the inner city, when my mom got the job, I was the most, giving people, you want some shoes? Giving all the kids shoes. People are like, no, this is not real. You're bringing us like Grant Hills right now? Yeah. As soon as we got some money, parents are like, all right, we're getting a house in the suburbs. Moving school systems. As soon as I got there, first day, I'm thinking I'm doing something, showing up in head to toe. I'm not just talking about shoes. Yeah. Head to toe, Fila, like the craziest. That normally would like really impress a 7th grader,
Yeah.
No, not in the suburbs. The first day of 7th grade was just so traumatic. And that's why I got the nickname Fila Boy, because people were like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Who is this kid? Yeah. Who is this kid? And Yeah. So yeah, it was a one-time cultural shock to come here from Russia to come to, America and like see the cars, the music, the clothes, the slang. I'm like trying to learn English and people are saying a whole other thing. And I'm like, wait, what? What are you saying? Fat? That's fat? Like, oh, that's cool. I remember being like, what is cool? Like freezing, like, no, man, it means like it's good. Like, and then, but the craziest shock wasn't even that. It was really coming from an inner city and going to the suburb, and yeah, that was an interesting time. But
The introduction to music coming from what I think of as sort of a black and white world of, communism, which is maybe true, maybe not. I don't know. That's sort of my image of the stories when you have, you're talking about the 80s and your influence. American music is the Beatles, which at that point was 20 years old,
wow.
when, when the music you were exposed to in previous to the US must be super regional. And then what brings you to this idea of, oh, I see that guitar, I'm gonna play that thing.
So my dad, even in Russia, my dad plays like 4 or 5 instruments, and so I remember going in like as a 5, 6 year old going. He would have an engineering job, but then because there wasn't enough money in communism, he would go and then do these wedding gigs, and so he would go. And I remember like me and my mom on the side, one of the gigs watching, and somebody came up and give him like a tip, and I was just like, wow, that's so cool. Like must have been like 5 rubles or some shit. But like, you know what I'm saying? But I'm like, whoa, like he's getting money. Like, no. And so the instruments was always around the house, but my dad being good and having perfect pitch. And also Russians have this intensity about us, I'll say, not them, us. We have this intensity, and like the Moscow Conservatory is like notorious for being the craziest, where they hit kids with like fucking rulers on their fingers for not playing the scale right type shit. So my dad has not hit me over not playing the scales right, but he's definitely got this Russian intensity about him. And so I remember being a kid and picking up, and he's like, no, 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 that's not, no, you don't, no, that's not how you play. And so I was kind of turned off of it. But when I got to America, like music was just such a big part of culture that I just, it was like I really was just infatuated with basketball. And then once Nirvana like really started making waves like that, it was basketball, but then it was also like I played a little guitar because I just picked it up at the house. And then I don't know if it was like some girls in 5th grade that were like, oh my gosh, you play guitar. That made me, I don't know what made me get a band together with my friend, and we would do Nirvana songs. And so
What
that
was
was,
it? Did you have a band name?
gosh, no, I don't even remember. Gosh, no, I don't remember.
Do you not remember, or you're not gonna
No,
say
no,
it?
no. I would tell you. I would tell you. Yeah, I would tell you.
It was kind of great, like the that era, because the same era for me of like picking up instruments. And I remember my mom and sister when "Smells Like Teen Spirit" came out, and they're like, "This guy can't sing." And if you're a younger brother, like my older sister and my mom would listen to Barbara Streisand, so here I am like, no, Barbara Streisand can sing, this guy can't. But meanwhile, I'm like, I love this guy. And as I picking up a guitar and going upstairs and being like, oh, these are songs I can play. These are power chords, and it's like, it's kind of cool. It's not 1-4-5. It's like slightly out. You're like,
Yeah.
oh man, this is pretty cool. And the guy's yelling like, is it okay? Is it okay to is singing what you is singing Barbara Streisand or is singing Kurt Cobain? And it was like, it literally, that was the album where I first questioned, oh, maybe I am not like my sister. It's like, you follow your older siblings thing. So like, I just remember like that same album and that era of like, obviously 10 for Pearl Jam. And,
Exactly.
it's like
Stone Temple Pilots is one. I've been coming back to that stuff, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. What an amazing
remember,
era. I
like,
hate to say
like-
it because I sound so, but man, coming
know.
back to Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana, these are incredible records, bro.
like, and
Incredible
Soundgarden
records.
and all that stuff.
Oh.
There was also, now I think because of streaming, you can have a very short attention span. But when you could only buy one album at a time, or if you started to join the mail order clubs.
Bro, was it not BMG?
Like 4
BMG, I was 100.
And Columbia, I think, each had like,
yes.
You could every like 6 months rejoin and get like, for 1 cent you get 7 CDs. You're like, shit, I'm gonna get Blind Melon, I'm gonna get like, you go down, you do all that, like whatever was a thing in the 90s, but also somehow would get like Fushnikins and Fugees.
And I was just, like, you're taking, because we've had this conversation when we're writing and we're saying that like, it was an interesting time because you had the Nirvana, but then you had the Wu-Tang and you had the Dre and Snoop phenomenon too. And it was like, I feel like that really helped shape me and you, I imagine, as well too. It wasn't just all rock. Like it was a lot of rap too, and that's
and you couldn't jump ship one song to the next unless you had a mix CD, which you didn't burn CDs yet, or mixtape. You literally had to listen to an album, then you would switch the CD, but you'd get through all 12.
Exactly,
and you'd really like, it's this is another thing where we'll sound dated, but the value of an album versus a single, especially in getting to know an artist,
there it is
that you immerse yourself into a world, especially the good albums. The fault of the music industry was at the time, sometimes they were selling a single package in an album. So
they're selling plastic. They're not selling music, they're selling plastic. And
the 11 songs besides the single were trash, and you just had to pay for the whole thing, and you'd sit through it, and you're like, this is terrible. Because it was hard to skip songs. Like you just would. But that was an era where you actually had to be in the moment. Anyway, so you pick up a guitar. I just went way off track.
But this is good, man.
You pick up the, Nirvana's out. You're impressing these girls because you're picking up a guitar. And you're like, check this out.
Yeah, precisely.
Could you sing at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I sucked at singing, but the drummer didn't sing, so I had to, like, you know what I mean? But yeah, it was Nirvana, and then I got into metal because I started, it was metal for like Metallica. I got into like guitar nerdery because you got to understand, you would put on radio and you would hear Eric Johnson. Yeah. Cliffs of Dover. It was a huge. I got to look it up, man. It must have been top 10 Billboard, and it was an instrumental guitar song. It had to have been. I've heard that song on the radio growing up on every station, every format, and it was like it was a time of like Eddie Van Halen and Eric Johnson, and where there was like shredders and guitar virtuosos, technical guitar virtuosos on the radio. So I'm listening to the radio like, damn, like Metallica. Remember hearing Metallica on the radio. I'm like, wow, you could do guitar solos. So I got into like the whole guitar thing.
Did you have like posters of Kurt Hammett and like
my parents didn't let me do posters, but I was like, Kurt Hammett, Megadeth. I did like Dimebag Darrell, like
Wait, why didn't they? Why didn't they let you have posters?
Well,
do you have basketball posters?
So at that time,
were you a Knicks fan? What's your team?
Oh man, no, I was a Lakers. Even though I don't know why it was Lakers for me.
Well, 80s,
no. I mean, look. I remember watching the Bulls. I remember watching. I think I just wasn't a Bulls favorite team because everybody was the Bulls. 92, 93, 94. It was what an era. Like I remember being there watching it with my grandfather and watching, and just really, I think the point to drive home though about this whole shock of coming over to America and being in communism, like we were so under the system in communism and so like almost in prison to what we could and could not do. And the idea of coming to America and like being free and saying curses and songs. And, my dad was always like, jazz. Jazz is the truest American art form. And coming back to it now, I know exactly what he means even deeper now, because coming from a communist world, coming to a place that invented a genre of music where you could literally make up the song as you go. Improvise. And so that's where it took over my life. Jazz at that point, it was from the Van Halen technical thing, and then I started getting into jazz and I think it was that freedom of seeing my mom design something create something from nothing. And I really. Sorry, I have to mention Jimi Hendrix too. That was, I remember the day that I fell in love with music on a different level. I remember it was the one day, and my mom was at work in New York. I couldn't drive me to anywhere, to any friend's house, and I lived far away from everybody. And I just the guitar, I was just like really about basketball. And then I said, you know what? I'm so bored. Let me just practice guitar. And there was a thing that my dad challenged me that I couldn't do. And I was like, and I literally practiced, I think, for like 9 hours. And I started being able to do it faster. When he got home, I said, look, Dad, I could do this scale, the pentatonic scale. And I'm fast. And he's like, what the, when did, what? Have you been practicing? I'm like, no, I just learned, I practiced today. He's like, wait, you learned how to do that in one day? The next day he came with a Live at Woodstock Jimi Hendrix CD. And when I remember putting on the headphones, it changed my life because it was so free. It was like these big records like Purple Haze and Foxy Lady. And I knew them, I have heard those records already, but hearing them improvise, and it was so like liberating and free that he could go anywhere. And I just remember that feeling. And that's what made me fall in love with jazz a few years later, is that like feeling of being free and just being able to take the music anywhere you please.
Going to school at all must have also been a moment of pride for your parents. But the family I grew up in, I was really scared to say I was a musician. It was like I had to come out to my parents and be like, I want to go to school for music.
There it is.
Because it was like, I used to say I'm going to be a heart surgeon because my grandma was a cardiologist. I went to as far as saying an entertainment attorney at one point when I was like 14, because I was just trying to get around. Yeah. I was just trying to get around the idea of saying like, I think what I really want to do is pursue art. And, and like seeing my parents like have to melt, and they were very supportive, but having to tell your parents, I want to go to Berklee School of Music, even if you were a well-studied, very accomplished guitarist at this point through high school, did your parents support that as immigrants, or were they like...
I'm so thankful and I'm lucky, and you even asking the question just reminds me how grateful, I am. But yeah, my parents, I remember, oh God, my uncle, I don't want to like throw him out there like that, but he took me when I was 14, he sat me down, and it was like, I don't know if he was drunk, I don't know what the deal was, but he sat me down and literally tried to talk me out of being in love with music, like literally try to talk me out of pursuing it, But
yeah, look, I definitely heard the when are you gonna get a real job?
No, but it was like so intense, and now thinking back on it, like, oh God, it's not the vibe. But
you were bringing it up partly because somewhere in your psyche it probably gave motivation to prove that person wrong. Yeah. So like, for what it is, the support's worth a lot, but so is the
opposition.
Other.
You're right, man. You're absolutely right. I should be grateful because that's what makes us stronger. And but I gotta say, so look, when I was 14, I got a full ride to the Berklee summer program. I was a prodigy. I got really good at jazz, and I was the youngest person to get the full ride to go to this program when I was 15 at Berklee. So I was in the Berklee system. So I knew when it was time to go to audition for Berklee College 3 years later, they were going to probably give me a scholarship because they wanted me around. They wanted me to be there. I represented it. You know what I mean? And I was making money by the time I was 14 off of music. I was playing jazz shows because I got really into it, and I got good, and I seen another kid doing it when he was 14, and he was a prodigy, and I was like, you know what, I could catch up to him. And I caught up to him. We started working together, and then I was just talking about this with my manager yesterday. That's where I feel like it set me up to do what I'm doing now, because it's before the internet. Well, okay, the internet was around. This is before we had access to it, right? I would have a sheet, drummers, bass players, piano players, horn players, and I would call them, and I would have a gig. I would have somebody, I would have a gig that pay maybe $50 each, and I need to get a bass player and a drummer. So I would call like drummers that, musicians that were like 50, 60, 70 years old. And that's another interesting part of my musical upbringing is I learned, I came up playing jazz. When I was 14, I used to play with literally jazz legends who were 70, 80 years old. So my favorite guitar player was Wes Montgomery. And so I was able to play with Eddie Buster, who used to play with as Wes Montgomery. And so I was getting mentored by somebody from that generation. And it's just, I love jazz because it really was musically and artistically really pleasing, and my dad, like, it was like really pleasing to my dad. Like, that was a connection. He just couldn't believe he had a son who was a jazz virtuoso, and like he would drive me when I was 14. He would drive me to these places where these crackheads and drug addicts would hang out, and I would play with the legends. It was like crazy, you know, like it was the thing about it, like, but that kind of leadership and calling people, checking in, reminding, hey, like, are you still good for tomorrow's gig? Like, okay. And then also getting to the gig. And this is exactly what I feel like I do now. Get to the gig. Everybody's like, okay, we're here. Okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. First is cocktail hour. We're just going to play drummer, please, just brushes. We're going to play these kind of songs. Let's start with this one first, just really quiet. And then second set, you know what, bass player, can you actually switch from upright to electric? We'll just do some of these other, you know what I mean, jazz fusion, quote unquote, things. And I would get through the gig, and I would like help curate, you know, the bar owner would come over and be like, hey, you guys are too fucking loud. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to pay for it. I'm like, hey, guys, you know what I mean? Like, hey, tell your drummer to stop fucking playing so loud. Like, so now this is what I do. I get to a session. I'm like, okay, guys, hear me out. I think we should do this and this. Does anybody have any ideas? Okay, I think if we write this, I could get a feature from this. Then maybe if it's good, like we could just send it straight to my manager who's working on this project. And I feel like it's the same fucking shit. We're curating rooms. And I feel like that was what I was doing when I was in my teens.
Is your recall for things like chord changes really in tune? Like, if I say, you know, what are the chord changes to Watermelon Man? Like, do you know, can you recall that stuff, or do you need a fake book in front of you?
Oh my gosh, I never used a fake book because I'm so glad you were having this conversation. This is a different, yeah. So I always, it's just so crazy. I was thinking about it today because my OG said, don't ever bring a fake book on stage. I said, got it, done, that's it. He said, if you want to play something, learn that shit. Learn the fucking melody. Don't ever bring a fucking fake book on stage with me, ever. So got it.
Yeah.
Never had to tell me then. I was telling my friends, yo, don't ever bring a fake book on stage. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I learned. My OG taught me. So I was like, yo. So you just got to learn it, learn the melody, and know it, and hear it, and hear it. I would play with OGs. They're like, you don't know it? Okay. They'll play it, and after the first chorus, you should know what the fuck it is because you heard it one time. You know what I mean? That's really how it goes.
Do you still have that recall? Most of these songs?
Yeah. Well, I've trained my ear to hear a song. If you're hearing, I'll tell you what the chords are before picking up an instrument.
Right. I mean, there's, you know, they're the likes of you and Elizondo, also a guest of this podcast. You know, these guys it's like, I remember, you know, the guys who, while talking to you, are also charting out the thing, you know, like they're so focused on it. How often are you using the studio guitarist skill set in your production today?
It's so crazy you say that because I can't really even talk about it much. But recently I did what I believe is so far to be the most innovative project of my career. I can't say much, but I will say this. I partnered up with another podcast guest, H.E.R, Thomas, and we made really just the most exciting thing we ever done. And so that, without saying too much, because we're really going to reveal, it's quite a surprise. But I really went back to some of my big arrangements. And so I was out there really arranging and charting out, you know, parts for a full big band, you know, 5 trumpets, 5 saxes, and 5 trombones. And so,
where did you record it?
All in my spot. I just love, you know, I love staying
But you weren't
home.
you weren't at East West formerly, you know.
We might go in and then re-record some things. I just, you know, just want to get it done. And you know, it's quick.
There's an efficiency part.
There's efficiency like every time. I'm like,
do you have the same saxophonist then play all 5 parts? Yes, right.
So I have to give him a shout out, Ian Roller. So I did a big band a couple of years ago. Bryson Tiller hit me up to do. He wanted to do because people just want to do jazz when it's fucking Christmas time. So it was Christmas time. He's like, oh, I want to do Winter Wonderland right. Big band. I want to do this version of this, like how Michael Bublé did. I want to do big band arrangement. I'm like, okay. It's all right. You know that's expensive, guys, right? To get a full big band. Of course, they're like, not trying to hear no East West. They're like, well, you do what you do. So anyway, I have to give Ian Roller a shout because this man came. He played, of course, alto saxophone, tenor saxophone, baritone saxophone. Then he played flute, he played piccolo, he played clarinet, and he played bass clarinet. And this fucking guy made it happen for me. And I give him a shout. He's yeah.
Okay, so you graduate Berklee. It isn't like the next day you start touring with Alicia.
Well, I was like a little confused. I went back to my parents' house, and so I think the most important thing
of Berklee, 10 years from graduating to like the shit really happening.
Well, it was so basically. I think the most important thing what happened for me in college is when I went there. Like I was really just like about jazz, but when I went there, my roommates, we were smoking weed, listening to Joni Mitchell, listening to Pink Floyd, and listening to other shit that socially I wasn't really around because I was around 60-year-olds. I was around only OGs for my whole life. I wasn't around, there wasn't many people my age that, you know what I mean? So, but for the first time, I'm now getting into a place where there's only kids my age, and they're listening to different shit. They're listening to different hip hop. They're listening to the Roots. They're listening to Lauryn Hill, D'Angelo. It was a whole neo soul movement at the time, and so that's when I really started gaining appreciation for the medium that we're in, which is not just music, but words and music. So songs. Mm-hmm. That's when I really started getting obsessed with songs, and so before I left school, I started writing songs, which was crazy for a jazz student to do because I would go to my jazz teacher and be like, so what you been working on? I'm like, I've been writing, I wrote this song. It's called Pretty Flower, Pretty, Pretty Flower, Please Don't Cry. They're like, what? Why the fuck? Wait, what? I thought you're supposed to be composing this atonal piece, like you told me, like for a woodwind quintet. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm like, no, like I'm inspired by like how the words relate to the music. It's crazy. I still think this is the coolest fucking medium, man, because you could really have the music and then literature. It's literally literature. My two favorite things, storytelling and music. Like songwriting is it's the most powerful medium, man.
I get, Miles Davis and Coltrane and Thelonious and go down the list of instrumentalists, primarily instrumentalists, and instrumental albums, but Duke Ellington was also an instrumentalist whose biggest records are songs. And no question, the great singers of the 20s, 30s, and 40s were all instrumentalists where their voice was an instrument. And somehow by the time we get to college, the minute that there's vocals or lyrics, it somehow loses its integrity as far as like it doesn't push the boundary anymore, or probably the reason why the medium's struggling is because if there isn't a leve or there isn't somebody who's singing, it just gets. It's lost because it's not relating to. It's only relating to themselves. It's just.
I'll be honest
just looking in a mirror over and over again.
But I'll be honest with you. It's like it's very meditative. I love that you're saying this is a great conversation. I will say this, and I'm not one of those guys that knows a couple Coltrane albums. Like I could sit here and actually talk Coltrane discography with anybody in the world, and nobody knows more about Miles Davis' discography. Having said that. Than me. I was the kid in college that was pissing off the Miles Davis class professor because I knew more than he was, because on this one recording he would say Tony Rose was 16. I was like, no, I know that's what they say on the recording, but actually I did the math. He was actually 17 at the time. Anyway, my favorite Coltrane album is Coltrane Johnny Hartman. It has vocals. It's the greatest. It's my David cool. Foster asked me what my one Desert Island album is, and without thinking I just said that, Coltrane and Hartman, because that's still my favorite, because there's that. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Look, I will say this, that there's something about meditation. There's something about art that we have to tune out the rest of the world, and we have to tell them what it is. We have to say, okay, I went deep inside of me. I'm more qualified. And so according to my taste, this is what I think the art that you should be ingesting. Like when I go omakase, like I'm not going to tell him what to give me. I'm like, bro, what's fresh? I'm not going to tell you to give me something that's not. You tell me what you do best. You tell me the fish that's fresh. I do believe that there was a period, which started with the bebop era that you're talking about in 1940, that jazz wasn't about popular culture anymore. It was about the clubs. It was about the underground. And it was about like, listen, I'm going to talk in slang. And if you're cool to hang on and follow the story and understand it, you're going to get it and you're going to be blessed. But if you're not, if you're jiving and if you're not cool, if you can't understand it, that's your loss. And so that's what bebop was about, is about having those deeper slang. Just think of it as like the deepest slang. That's what bebop happened. And it was self-indulgent. You're like, what are these guys talking to each other? Just like literally, but
no,
man.
It's just Dizzy Gillespie being like, watch me.
But when you really learn to, it's like wine. You have to learn how to ingest it. When you learn how to ingest jazz, good jazz, and you listen to it, it's the craziest storytelling. And you're like, wow, he's not just playing a bunch of notes. He's having a theme that he's developing, and he played that melody there because he's quoting a whole other theme from a whole other song. It gets so deep, man, and it's like the ultimate meditation, but at the same time, I get it why it's not for everyone, and that's my thing too. I was basing that, and what I take away from that is being able to close my eyes and listen to my own voice, and that is the takeaway for me from improv.
Yeah, the first time I ever wrote lyrics to an existing melody was my jazz teacher in high school saying, I want you to write lyrics to Kind of Blue. And it was...
Which song? Like, probably So What?
Kind of Blue on the, or whatever track 3 is. But isn't that like...
It's the blue... Okay, got it. Yep.
What is that? Blue is Green.
There it is.
All right.
Blue and Green.
Our good friends at Chartmetric have all the data you need to power your music career. From playlist placements to stream counts to follower demographics and many more. It's never been easier to understand how your artists fit in the music industry and how they can grow. Chartmetric does the work for you, providing actionable insights and visuals on their up-to-date global data that covers over 10 million artists and 100 million songs, so there's no math required. Use it to find out things about your favorite artists and any of the artists and writers on this podcast. Plans start as low as $10 a month. Learn more and get started today at chartmetric.com. Anyway, whatever it is. But that was like the first time of actually doing that, which then the amount of times in my professional career that I've had to write lyrics to an existing melody. And in the room, how many songwriters don't write lyrics well, but they write melodies really well, and they'll start by scatting in some capacity.
Yes. Yep.
But they can't necessarily articulate in lyric what can match that melody. And similarly, as somebody who grew up doing jazz as a singer, that ability to... I remember getting frustrated with an album I produced in my mid-20s because the person couldn't create new melodies on the fly quickly. And it was like, when you do jazz, you're just like, oh, well, how about this?
Yes.
Okay, well, this works through the chords. Okay, let's move this over here. Let's move it to this note. That's just the knowledge of how a melody fits over chords and chord changes is so valuable in what we do. Even maybe it's even more valuable that I wasn't great at it, because I was writing more hooks than in a way as a jazz. You know, I wasn't what's his name, Kurt whatever, the
Elling.
Yeah, I wasn't Kurt Elling. Like, I wasn't able to scat.
But you had to break it down to the bare minimum of like, okay, what is the chorus
here? It was general. It would be more like how Neil Young plays guitar. You know, it's like, it's a good thing
exactly.
that he was not a good guitarist. Or
he wasn't the worst either.
But he wasn't the worst.
He actually, the funny thing about Neil Young as a guitar player, he actually went out there as if he was fucking Jimi Hendrix. He went out there and took solos. I'm like, look at this guy. And he's actually one of my favorites. But it is true, not for his guitar playing. But I give him props. I'm like, wow, he's out there. He's.
So all right, let's go. You know, you start touring with some of the biggest artists.
Lauryn was my first gig, and it was wild. It was nuts. It was chaotic, but then after that, I stayed in New York, and then Alicia was like, there wasn't a lot of people already in New York, a lot of artists, and so there was very few gigs in New York, and so I got the Alicia gig, and that changed my life. That took me around the whole world as a guitar player. But at that point, I knew. I remember talking to the sax player, and he was a legend. He was originally on the Police Regatta de Blanc tour, and 10, 20 years later, he's on tour with Alicia, and I'm like, he's 51 years old, I'm 22, he's making less money than me, and I'm like, damn, okay, like, I don't want this to be me in 30 years, like, so I'm like, okay, I need to keep honing in the pen and the writing, because like, that's really the future of and so that's when I started to slightly understand the power of making copyrights and songwriting, and because I'm like, okay, I'm getting a check, but like
not that check.
How do I prevent to be 30 years later making less money than the friggin' 20, you know what I mean? Like devaluing, right? So it just started pushing me. So I would be in my hotel room writing and recording and slipping Alicia some demos and CDs at the time, and she started taking me around to the studio, and that was my first time co-writing in a studio, was when Alicia would bring me around,
You even being in that experience, it gets you exposure to what it is to write a song, but those songs bluntly aren't necessarily coming out, and they're not necessarily hits.
Yeah.
Were you discouraged? As somebody who was where music comes so easily to you, you walk in, you got to be like, how hard can this be? At least I feel like I would be like that.
Oh no, I was dealing with some political BS, and that's when I was more discouraged by being in a room and having to do the politics, and it was very complicated at the time. Look, I don't want to look back on it and talk shit, but at the same time, I want to appreciate it, and that made me who I am, and it made me understand the room and learning how to read the room, because it was very competitive in the room. There was somebody else there that she would bring around that was kind of like me. We would kind of compete for the same spot, and he was older and already writing with her, and so it made me feel very alienated, and it's like, it just showed me a different part of the creative process, that when Quincy Jones says, when God leaves the room, and I remember at that moment realizing, like, I never want to be in a room suggesting something just because somebody will think just because I won't be a contributor to this record if I don't say something. If it's better for me not to say something, if it's better for me not to change the chords because they're great, just shut up and don't, you know what I mean? Just be here and wait until you actually have something valuable to add, versus like what I was exposed to then is somebody in the room just being like, oh, change it just to include themselves on it. That's, to be honest with you, I don't even want to talk smack about that period, but learning what I took away from that period was really that, man, and how political it could be, and that, like, that's not how I make the best music, and that's not how, you know what I mean? It's like, I learned, and I remember saying, like, I never want to do that. Years later, I never, and I remind myself now, like, sometimes when I feel in a room, there's like somebody else and it's moving quick, and I'm like, oh God, I want to be here, but I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of decisions still to make. The song is not done, the production is not done, it's not mixed. There's a lot of decisions to make. If it's not broken, don't say it just to insert yourself.
Yeah, there's the version of that in the pop game is that there's often 3, 4, 5, 6 people in a room. There's 6 people in a room. All your contribution needs to be is 16.6%. most people who are in a room at a certain level have all written songs by themselves or 50-50s or are used to 33%. So they're used to at least being heard a third of the time. But when you really calculate what 16.6% is of a song, you're talking about essentially if your job was coming up with the melody of the pre-choruses and you did that well, that was great. If you were the one that said, I think we can beat this concept, that can be enough. Or even if, if the artist is really in tune with what they want and your job is to step out of the way and maybe question stuff and say, well, could you try it like this? Could you try it like that? You know what? Your way was better. All of that has value.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's this idea that when you put a writer in a room that is used to being heard 33% of the time, they're going to really struggle when there's 6 people in a room and they only have to do half as much work, And it's like, and you're just trying to, a lot of songwriters need to learn what the value is of what they're doing in the room that day. And, if everyone has 100% of the song, it's going to be either really vanilla or really bad.
Yeah.
But it's not going to sound like fun.
Yeah.
It's going to sound like a lot of people had an opinion.
Absolutely. And it's funny going back to a jazz quote. Pat Metheny said that if you're used to collaborating a lot, you got to make sure to make some time to write by yourself. And if you're used to writing by yourself, you have to make it a point to collaborate with people.
Yes.
And I say that because I love collab, and I think this is a beautiful medium. However, I'm not going to say anybody else's name. I'll say I know what it's like to get comfortable with somebody. And if somebody's always doing drums, I know that I'm going to do my little chords. I'm going to sit back, let them do the drums. But that's not going to make me necessarily a better producer.
Yeah.
Now, it's not always the greatest idea. Well, you do chords and I do. Well, no, like you're dope at drums, I'm dope at chords. But it's very important to continue. For me, at least, I value developing and being well-rounded, and as a musician producer, and I value songwriters that could give me great input on production, and I value some of my best work is because I'm able to come in as a producer and help write the song. Now, I'm not a Ross, or I'm not great like that, but if I could just, you ever carry something up the stairs and it's so heavy and then somebody comes and just lifts it and it feels so much, they just add a little bit of help, but it feels so much lighter. I just want to be like that, the writer in the room. They're like, I'm not going to be the one I shouldn't be the one carrying the fucking lyric writing of I should not be. If it is, I know the room got miscurated and we're going to leave with a decent, an okay song. But at the same time, if I could just help lift the finger, you guys are just working so hard on this word, and I'm like, hey, why don't we say, you know what I mean? Like, oh God, yeah, you're right. You know what I mean? Or like, hey, can we maybe just tweak the concept a little bit? I don't know. Like, I value being able to just know a little bit about everything. And I urge the writers too to understand a little bit about production. So you don't say things like this to a producer. Well, I don't know. It's not it. Well, okay. It's too fast. Yeah. It's too slow. It's too dark. It's too bright. It's the snare drum that's bothering me. If you could get particular, God, we love that, man. There's nothing worse than an A&R or somebody being like, I
like it. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's like
either's terrible. Yeah. At least your ego's filled by I like it. But it's not. If somebody, the A&R guys that are like, this is a smash every time, they will break your heart more than the person who's and doesn't like anything. But the person who's like, I don't like anything is probably also has the inability to make your song better.
Exactly. I just love it. I love when we're all in tune, like working with a writer and like, okay, they're not stepping on my toes. They're just like, hey, Gitty, I love what you're doing, but don't you think this should be like, we should put some tempo on it? Like something like that. Like, wow, thank you. And the same thing, like for a producer, I tell the producers assigned to me, I'm like, guys, if you're going in there and you're making some chords and the drums and then you're literally have your back turned to the writers the whole time, you are not really producing the session. If you're doing a beat and then stepping out or sending, like, I'm sorry, you're not really producing the session. You have to know enough about what they're doing to say, yo, I love that. Or like, damn, almost, guys, I think we could beat that line. Or like, you know what? Don't change it. That's perfect. Don't question it. You had it already, you know? And so I feel like education is not a bad thing. You're like, let's just keep growing, keep learning. People are like, oh, theory, I don't want to learn theory. It's not bad, bro. Like, learning theory is not bad. Learning no kind of knowledge is bad. It's just how you use it, you know?
When we were first writing together, you're talking about running into somebody who introduced you as a great guitarist. And this is while you were already starting to get recognized as one of the best producers in music. And I remember you being like, offended not that somebody called you a guitarist, but it's like, what do you have to do to show people that you're not just a guitarist anymore? When did you believe yourself that you weren't just a guitarist?
Well, I started not liking the word musician, because when you say musician, when I started understanding business, when I started understanding that musician equals work for hire, producer, writer, part owner. So when I understood the value of intellectual property, that's when I started realizing that I don't even like to be called a musician, because they just assume I'm a work for hire. Oh, he's a great guitar, great musician. Yeah, you could hire the great guitar player for like not a lot of, you know what I mean? Not a lot of money, relatively speaking. And so when I started understanding that word devalues me, and that being called a producer actually, it's like saying he's a part owner of this song or company, whatever. And that's when I started kind of, you know, changing that. And not, but at the same time, I don't think I'm also not coming back to the fact that it's a beautiful thing that I'm a musician and that we're musicians. And I can't say it's bad, because not everybody has the same ambition or the same goals as me, and then it's okay to be a musician. And it's an honorable thing, man. You know. But for me personally, yeah, it was that particular situation. I know what it was. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, it was. Sorry, I'm still processing all of it, because I think a part of me is having something to prove to myself. When I actually did prove something to myself, then it's like, I mean, does anybody introduce Mike Lozano Jr. as a bass player? If you said, "Yo, this is a dope bass player," would he get offended? He'd probably be like, "Yo, that's nice."
I love it. He played bass on The Wrong Man, and when he came in and played on it, it's like I'd worked with him as a producer, and I knew that he was a great bassist, but I hadn't seen him chart out anything. And I didn't realize, when he said he was a studio bassist before, like the extent of it,
yes,
it was as if I've worked with Josh Freese on drums, like those kinds of things where you see these guys who are great studio musicians and you see how they chart out stuff. And it's like going to Nashville, that whole crew of people who are just, that's what they do. And, it is really interesting. Like I think he's honored now to be known as a great bassist.
And that's what I'm saying, bro. That's what I'm saying, because George Benson has the same story. He started as a jazz guitar player, became one of the biggest pop stars at the moment. You know, after Thriller, that's the first thing they did was Give Me the Night with Quincy and Rod Temperton, right? He was a huge pop star. But now he says he loves being called a guitar player.
Yeah.
After all that, because he's like, man, I don't want to be known as a pop star. Everybody knows me as a pop star, but wow, to be known as a really who he is, an innovator of the instrument, to be known as a technical and jazz innovator on the guitar is more. So that's why I asked. That's interesting that you said that, because I'm starting to get to that point too, where people are like, oh, I didn't know you play guitar, and I'm like, wow, I probably should. Yeah, probably should post some videos or something.
Well, this is the weird thing where I think we all want to curate our image, and we can't really, and the world just doesn't have bandwidth to define you as multiple things in a world where everyone's hyphenated.
Yeah,
it's very complicated. It's like there are a number of people who've said that they didn't know I write songs because they thought I was a podcast host. And you're like, what? I'm not a podcast host. I just interview my friends and we release it in this medium. But like, I can't even wrap my head around that, but it's like people just, that's how people view it. And you kind of have to be like, that's cool. It's cool that people even give a shit at all about any of it.
Yeah.
Like you can only hate on it so much.
Yeah.
On the way, it being like the way people view you.
No, I know. I know. It's, it honestly, it's something I'm still processing and I'm still working on. I don't want to say struggling with, but I'm still working on it. And you said something is like a triggering word to his whole, and I know you didn't mean it, but even those two words that you just said, he played on, those words drive me crazy. When people text me, yo, can you come play on this? Like, what? No, I could come help you produce that record. I'm not going to come. They're like, no, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. Now they're like, no, I'm so sorry, dude. That's what I meant. Before they were like, early in my career, they're like, well, no, sorry, I'm the producer. Can you come play with it? I'm like, no, thank you. And they would get mad at me. That was, I think, the biggest transition. And I tell every musician, every touring musician wants to become a producer and a songwriter. I'm sorry, everybody. They all get sick of being on the road and they're all like, what do I got to do? Me, I had to actually say no. I had to say, no, listen, I can't do that. I don't do that anymore. I'll come there and I guarantee you I'm going to play some original melodies on the guitar that are not part of the current composition. If we could do something. I started out my first placement with J. Cole. Apparently, I did that guitar melody at the end. I got my 2.5%. It was fire. You know what I'm saying? Got my credit, and there began my songwriting career off my 2.5% on apparently J. Cole. And that's why I started going from there. They were like, oh, you did that. Can you come play on this? I'm like, no, like I got to do it for 5%, and some people had problems. Other people, got mad at me and said did. And then it went from that to like, okay, well, there's nothing but guitar in the song. So if I'm just doing it, I'm like, aren't I co-producing, And then I had a lot of falling out with my producer friends who only wanted me to be a writer on it. You know what I mean? And so it was musician, writer, then producer. Now it's like maybe I could just chill and not have a complex about it. Yeah, exactly.
There is a weird thing where because we have a writer who's a world-class guitarist who basically produces these records, and it's really interesting to see the battles of like, there's a song that I played a guitar part on that is the theme of the song. The first minute and a half of the song is only the acoustic guitar that I played, and then strings and all these things come in halfway through. And the battle of like, hey, I'm a co-producer on this. My story, not this. It wasn't anybody else.
No, listen, brother, I know this.
And they were like, well, you just played guitar on it. And I was like, well, if I played drums, you somehow wouldn't consider that?
No.
Drums are like the co-producer.
Drums,
if I program drums, you wouldn't even flinch. You'd be like, he's a co-producer. But because I played the guitar that is the most identifying part and melody of the entire song outside of the top line, wouldn't that constitute co-production? And it was this huge, it really became a battle where I probably won't end up working with those producers again, although we're friendly. It just was this weird moment of, I don't understand why this instrument somehow still falls under studio work.
It's crazy.
When it actually adds melody often. I'm not talking about strumming chords that anybody does. I'm talking about like a picking pattern that becomes an identifier.
This is so funny because I don't know. I'm pretty sure you haven't had him on the podcast, but he's one of my best friends, one of the greatest producers alive. This guy Roger Shahayed, and we laugh about this all the time. That's his background too. That his first big hit. Like they were
Berklee.
Yeah, and it was, I don't want to put anything out there, but he's gone through his fair share of trouble. People be like, oh, you just played this, oh, you didn't actually do it, like you just played piano on it or something like that. And so it's crazy. And listen, I'd be lying if I told you that 2 weeks ago I didn't hear those words. Oh, but didn't you just play guitar? Mind you, this wasn't a co-production. This was my track that had these things, but it sounded like to this particular A&R that it was mostly guitars. And when I think negotiating a fee, going back and forth, he mentioned to my manager, but the track, isn't it just guitar? Which I'm like, listen, brother, I've been playing guitar
on Love Yourself when it's just an electric guitar and then trumpets.
You know what I said? I said, bro, feel free to redo it.
Yeah.
Feel free to redo it. Give me my 50% publishing and feel free to reproduce it. And then come back to me. See when you can get somebody else to play that part like that. But this is the thing, it doesn't matter. And I don't even like when people being at the studio because I work quick. Why? Because I've been doing this for 30 years. But just because you see me doing that part in 2 minutes, you're like, wait, you want all this? You did it in 2 minutes? It's like, bro, I've been doing this for 30 years so that I could do it in 2 minutes.
This doesn't have to end in an argument, but I'm curious about your thoughts on this. As a songwriter who often writes in sessions, certainly 50-50s, I'm writing all the lyric and melody.
Even more sometimes, huh?
And often the vocal production and all this stuff. Why does a producer get 50% of publishing?
I think it's based in hip-hop.
And why does then why shouldn't the songwriters get 50% of the production?
That's an interesting question. So I think it stems from my understanding. It stems from hip-hop, the whole 50-50 thing. It stems from hip-hop. And that is being that a big part of two reasons. One, a big part of the medium is sampling. And so they would do 50-50 so that the sample will come out of the producer side. Because usually the sample would take up 50%, so the producer would be left with nothing. So that's why they do it like that. The second reason is that when you think of the way, and this was happening before hip hop, but I talked to Earth, Wind and Fire. He was telling me that's how September or Let's Groove Tonight or September, one of them happened. They had the music, so they were doing. Look, even Don Henley, Boys of Summer, the track was done. Mike did the track first, and so the whole idea of doing the track first and just writing the lyrics later to it. It was happening before hip-hop, but with hip-hop, it became exclusive. And so that's, to me, how pop music started being made. Instead of getting a room of writing, it would be a track, and then people would write to it. So that's why I feel like it was, okay, there was writing, there was that form of writing in the track, and there's that, and the producer had to clear the samples. So you didn't want to fucking clear from the artist side, so the artist was happy to... and then you had to clear the sample from the production side. But I see what you're saying, dude.
I'm just wondering.
I see what you're saying.
There are times where, I'll hand a song that's completed to then that it ends up getting produced not by me or not by me solely, and we share. And it doesn't always have to be an equal thing, but it's just an interesting conversation of like. I just find that a lot of what I do is production. I know that because I'm a producer on songs too. And so there are times when I'm not the producer, but what I'm doing in a session or to a song is clearly production. Sometimes it's chords and it's all the things. And so you're sitting there doing all the things. And then as a songwriter, you're like, I'm going to walk away with, 33% of this song because the artist and the producer are here too. Even if the chords, the melody, lyric, the vocal production could be primarily one writer, and that person walks away with a third with none of the points or any of the advance. I see why songwriters in this era in particular, when they're often in the room creating it, are starting to feel, just feel like they should contribute. Yeah. They should be compensated for their 30 years of experience. Not necessarily by the producer. The producer can advocate for the songwriters to also get a point, or can, I don't think it should come out of the producer's share. I think it can be on top of, like we're all on the same team.
I'll tell you what, I'm agreeing with you. And furthermore, as a producer, if anybody added anything to the master recording, you should not be surprised if they ask for a point, credit, part of your points, whatever it is, part of your advance, whatever.
Yeah.
If the writer's in the room and they strummed, or even did some background vocals, if they're in any way, let's just talk black and white legal. If you're on a track saying, hey, you are a co-owner of the master recording because you as a human being are appearing on that recording. So if you as a human being are playing some chords, you are a co-owner of that recording until signing a document that says you're not or you're a part, whatever, you're going to do the point thing. So it's crazy. The one thing, again, no, it's not an argument. It's a conversation, because I wish there was one rule that would just make sense. All right, you do 50 of this, 50 of this. But there's two cases. There's the one case where I am in a room with people, and as a producer, I'm actually really Nashville style. Like, we're writing this fucking thing together. It's 2 chords, and then they leave, go to another session, and I'm sitting there for 2 fucking weeks trying to figure out what the right drum sound is or the right thing, and then going back and forth. The A&R is like, no, make it more energetic. No, it's too energetic. Now go back. And so finally I come in, and people are like, wow, well, let's just be real. Sometimes a hitting track can make a song a hit. Like the vocal is good, but when you hear it with the music, you're like, whoa, this is really sounding like a hit now. And so that's the only thing, as producers who actually are writing, who actually are in the room writing, and just getting the vocal down first and the song, and then going and spending a whole other day producing it. We gotta do that too, because it's just a different thing. My boy Ant Clemens he'll come write a fucking song in 2 hours, leave, go do another session, then go to another session. That man wrote 3 songs that day, 3 copyrights. While me, I'm like, oh, I'll just stay here and I'll just get the drums right, or I'll just get the piano right today and get the production right. I can't go and bounce around and do 3 other copyrights today. So it's also not right when somebody, sometimes like, I've seen it happen. And I'm like, I see the producer, like, just put a beat on it and be in the room. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy, because the songwriter actually wrote the chords.
And you
laid in. The producer's like, can you just lay those chords in? They laid the chords in. This wrote the song, demoed the song, really did it. And then the producer produces it. And then the label says, we don't love this production. We're going to have somebody else reproduce it. And then the producer still gets like a fucking half share. And you're like, wait.
Yeah.
So what exactly did he do? Because we didn't use his beat.
It's so messy.
I see it all the time.
Now that it's not siloed, when you bring up Quincy and you bring up some of the like that kind of thing, like, those guys didn't get publishing.
No. But the songs he wrote, he got publishing on PRT because he wrote PRT, sure. But he doesn't have it on Thriller.
Yeah,
he doesn't have it on Rock With You.
Listen, I want to keep going on your story, and I know this is what happens when you're friends with the guests too. Like, it'd be a lot easier if I didn't know you or didn't like you. Okay, so you've done a lot of stuff, but then once you get into the Mac Miller, may he rest in peace. That's when it starts to become like that guy's a writer. That guy's different. Like, it's not that you didn't have cuts before that, but there's like a level of that, and then Trey Songz and Jeremiah and Rick Ross, and you're clearly falling in a certain genre.
So what happened was, there's one little part I left out, is when I quit Alicia because I didn't want to go back on tour, and I had that, little traumatic experience in the studio, like, over and over again. And so I quit, and I said, I'm starting my own band with my best friends, because I wanted to write and produce music. And all I wanted to do is write and produce music. And so I said, you know what? I saved up money from touring with Alicia. I didn't get any credit on this upcoming album. I don't want to just go back on tour, help her promote the album. I got to keep building. My gut is telling me I need to keep building my muscle as a producer and writer. My gut's telling me if I go back on the road for 2 years, I'm going to miss my window. And so I started a band with my best friends. And the value of that was when I pinpointed the sound of my production. And that's when the first time that I made something and we listened to it, like, holy shit, there's nothing on the market out there like that. And instead of me trying to copy Dr. Dre and Scott Storch and John Bryan and Mike Elizondo and Jeff Basker, I'm like, whoa, this is the first time that I made something that sounds like me. And that's when the first time that I pinpointed the sound of my production. And that's when the first time that I made something and we listened to it, like, holy shit, there's nothing on the market out there like that. And instead of me trying to copy Dr. Dre and Scott Storch and John Bryan and Mike Elizondo and Jeff Basker, I'm like, whoa, this is the first time that I really feel that we've created a sound. No matter if the major label picks us up or not, no matter what happens, I know I have found my voice as a producer because I made something that's unique to anything in the market. And when Radiohead showed their support and Tom York really showed their support for a couple of our records on our album and listed it as their favorite album of 2011, I was like, okay,
crazy.
That's my hero. Jimmy Jam was one of those too. And Snoop Dogg too, ironically, because I learned English by listening to his shit when he was like a big fan of the band. And so that gave me the confidence to know that, okay, I have a sound now. So then coming to LA and starting getting into production, I always knew like, okay, I'm good at guitar, but I do have an aesthetic and I do have a taste of something particular which allows me to make a certain kinds of music that J. Cole, Mac Miller, and all those artists were kind of Chance the Rapper were gravitating to. You know, if you listen to, it's kind of crazy, man, because I did it 14 years ago, but everything I'm doing now and the sound that I'm doing now is really stemmed off of the shit I was doing in 2009. It's so similar. So similar. Going back to tape, going back to live drums, this is really what my sound is now. It's crazy how much of it stemmed being in an indie band, being broke, and just putting the art first and being like, what is that sound? And I'm glad it didn't pop off for me early on in my career, man, because if I would have had a hit early on that time with Alicia, if I would have had a hit at the age of 24, 25, I didn't have that confidence in that sound. I would have not known what I did to get there and try to replicate it and not do it again.
Totally.
15 years later, now I really, I really worked for what I have, and I know I can do it again if I have to.
There's a long list of amazing artists that you've worked with, but there's something about being part of an artist and their journey on the rise that's really exciting. And H.E.R, I feel like is become sort of the, the coming out party for both of you guys in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Do you feel like you've made it?
No, I mean, I do. I'm sorry. I do.
I
feel I do. I do feel like I made it because when I could wake up, take my daughter to school, spend time with my daughter, and then know that I'm living my purpose, that to me is making it. And I really look, man, I want at least 5 more houses. I want all that money in my account. But at the same time, knowing that I'm living my purpose, I mean, that is just the most mentally liberating, freeing thing to know that I'm like, I make the music. And I swear, Ross, I think you feel the same way too. I make the music that I want to make. And I'm not to say that I'm like, fuck you. I genuinely love the shit that I make. And I genuinely feel like I'm around people like yourself and the other writers that when I do something new, they're like, Gitty, that's dope. That's a fresh sound. Like, and occasionally so I feel like I made it only because we live our purpose, and I could literally put food on the table for my daughter and my family and make the music I want to make. It's great, man. It's what's better than that. Like, just to do it again, just to keep doing it. That's all I want is to keep doing it.
Your work with, Victoria Monet and H.E.R and all this stuff that's so credible. Do you feel like you're ever on the outside of the pop game?
Oh my gosh, all the time. I still don't have a top 10. So that's why when I said no, my first reaction when you said, have you made it? I said no, because right off the bat, my mind went there.
Interesting to not have a top 10, but you've been, ranked at the top of,
Well, it's coming. It's coming, but I love the challenge. I love the competition, and I pride my, something I wanted to come and talk today about is that, like, because I know it's a songwriter podcast, and the advice I give to all producers that want to meet with me is like, dude, I have one secret that I did is attach myself to dope songwriters. As a producer, bro, that's the smartest thing that you can do is attach yourself to great. Whether it's the Priscilla, T-Ron, Lunch Money, Ilse, whoever it is, to be able to, people like that, with people like yourself or Priscilla or T-Ron, when you guys call me and say anything, yo, listen, I got this 17-year-old I'm thinking about signing. Can you go? Listen, if it's a wordsmith, a copyright smith, I'm like, yes, I'll be there. I don't care, because I don't care what it is. We got to establish a relationship that we're just creating copyrights. I don't know what it's for. You know, in 2019, Priscilla's like, dude, let's go. You're the only other person I've met who does R&B, who loves country music. Let's make a country trap album. And I was like, listen, Priscilla, you're not signed. We don't have shit going. You're not even managed by anybody. Like, you want to change your name to Money Long. My manager says it's an awful name because it's spelled Mooney Long. But you know what, bro? You're an incredible songwriter and a copyright maker. And how else am I gonna spend my days than to do 3 songs with you? So sure, let's just go in. And we spent months together just making shit that I didn't know where it was gonna go. It was innovative music to me. And I'm like, I don't care what happens with it. I went to every label. Do you guys want to sign this artist Money Long? All of them said no. All of them. And I was like, I don't care. Like, these songs are great. And all these years later, like, Priscilla, I could call her now and I'll say, I need your help. And she'll come in. She's like, I don't even do sessions. It was like a couple of years ago. I was like, Priscilla, I know you don't do sessions, but can you come in? I'm with John Legend. I just need you to come, you know? She's like, sure, I got you. And so to be able to have that, that's like what is our productions if it's not attached to a great song? So I just want to encourage all producers to take care of, and I was debating on even saying this publicly, but like, yeah, man, I'm definitely known if I write with somebody and they really do some great work and they're like, and we do a couple of records and I get a song deal out of it or like 2 fucking advances out of it, I will definitely call them and I'll be like, listen, I'm going to pay you what I paid my lawyer. 5%, I'm going to give you 5%. You don't have to say anything. And I've done more. I'd write a song with somebody and then they place it with an artist. I'll say, look, you didn't even ask for it. What's your Venmo? I got you. And so I will do that. And I encourage you producers. Now, can't do that with everybody. I have to speak for the producers too, because sometimes writers, just like anybody else, it could be a little underwhelming. Like, as a producer, I feel like I'm carrying the weight. I'm writing it. They like leave early. I'm stuck with the artist. That's happened to me. The artist left early, and I'm like, well, somebody's got to write the second verse with the artist, and so I'm stuck. At those cases, I'm like, okay, now this reminds me why I get paid more and why I get my advance and my points, because you left early. But man, you got to attach yourself as a producer. Like Jimmy Iovine, his whole thing was he attached himself to a producer. You as a producer, my whole thing was I attach myself to writers and I'll do anything for them, even if it's doing some shit I don't want to do. Priscilla had a show. She called me. She was like, Gitty, I don't have a guitar player. I don't have a backline system. And I told my guy, Kevin, who signed to me, I said, Kev, we're going to drive to the Bay and we're going to do this fucking 5-song set with you. And you're going to sleep on the floor of this hotel tonight. And I'm telling you, it's going to be for no money, but I'm telling you, something is going to happen one day. And sure enough, that was a month before Hours and Hours blew up. And now me and Kev, we did her last single, and we did her next single coming up. And so I'm like, I sound like I'm scheming on you writers, but I'm like, no, like that's my way of partnering up. And like, that's what I owe it to, man. The best things, the best songs are, you know what I mean? Look, On My Mama is Victoria, you know what I mean? Like, any great thing that I've ever been a part of, got to thank the writers, man.
I love that. The Clive Davis thing was similar. It was like, all these artists come and go. The biggest of the biggest artists from 5 years ago, almost very few of them are as big today.
Yes.
There's a handful, of course, yeah.
Very few, you're right.
But there are so many, and go back 10 years. I can think
of more who are not.
Or 15 years, go back 15 years of these ones that was like the whole industry revolved around. And you can't find most of them anywhere near a chart. But there are a ton of writers that were big 10 years ago that are still big now. Compared to others. Okay, so now we're going to do the last segment, a 5 for 5. I'm going to just list 5 things. Some of it comes off the top of your head,
Yeah.
Let's start with Moldova.
Communism, Judaism, Eastern European folk music, bullying, and humble beginnings.
The guitar.
Wes Montgomery, Jimi Hendrix, Paul Simon. This is so random, dude. Andre Segovia.
Hey.
There's so many. It's so many things. I don't even. I guess. Bread and butter.
R&B.
American black music.
Josh.
My right hand. So wait, do I have to say 5 things about?
No.
Oh, okay. Can I just do the one?
People just do the things. Whatever comes. Josh is your manager, by the way. I probably should specify. And then your parents.
Foundation. Yeah, foundation. Sorry, these are such horrible answers I just gave you. These are so cheesy.
They're beautiful. I appreciate you doing this podcast, man. I mean, it's that thing, like you said. I know that this is the kind of conversation that's happening now that in 5 years from now, it'll be like, holy shit. These are the things that happened in our last 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's going to be wild because the 5 years ago, this conversation was totally different. And you're on such a solid trajectory. And I've been in the room with you. It's fun. I think that's the other part that a lot of times, not writing songs. I don't know who said writing songs should be fun because it's not always. It's work. It's hard to write a good song. Yeah. It's easy to write a song. It's hard to write a good song.
Yeah.
A great song is often really hard. Granted that Tehran and Priscilla can sometimes spit out something, and Ant can always spit out sometimes a great song where it doesn't seem hard at all. But for many of us, writing songs is really hard to do well, and you make it such an enjoyable session. That's why I like writing with you. Maybe the song's good too. Kind of irrelevant because I'm gonna still go home and my wife's gonna be like, how was your day? I'm gonna say it was good or it wasn't. I'm not even gonna talk about how good the song is because I won't have a bounce of it yet. And and if I had a bounce of it still, it would be weird if I guess there's somewhere I'm like, the day was shit but the song's amazing. But for the most part, I know that I came home from seeing you at the farmer's market and I was like, you know what I saw? That says a lot. You make people smile. So
thank you.
I think
that, man.
Maybe you make people better musicians. I don't know, but I know you make people happier musicians.
Wow, Ross, that's amazing. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Thank you. Wow.
Well, there you go, man. That's your interview.
I love it.